That song gets me every time. Ooh, it's still playing in my ear because I have it open in another tab. Wow, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Hi, Brandon. How
Hey,
you
Chloe.
doing?
Good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. Welcome back, everyone, to 8 Bits. I think this is our first time streaming on the Microsoft developer channel. So,
That's
hello
right. We're
to
uh
all our
we're
new
we're
viewers.
growing, we're branching out. I like to think of it as us taking over.
Yes.
We kind of stumbled upon this, and as a Microsoft employee and as a developer, I probably should have known that we had a Microsoft developer YouTube channel before, but I stumbled upon it this week and I was like, "Hey, can we can we simul stream to this?" And nobody said no.
What a time to be alive. So exciting. I'm super excited for all our new viewers. If you've never watched the show before and you're kind of going, who's this quirky lady with the pink headphones and this guy with the, is that the, this is fine dog? Yes, it is.
Oh
On the
yeah.
shelf back there.
And a Xamarin Monkey.
And Sammer Monkey.
Shout out.
We are your hosts, Chloe and Brandon. We host this show every week called 8 Bits, which is a show where we talk to really awesome guests about all the cool things that they do in the community. We kind of talk about the behind the scenes thing, get a little off topic. We've talked about, what have we talked about, Brandon? Theme parks. We've talked about, oh my goodness, bread, clowning, boss clown. Definitely watch some of our previous episodes.
Because we have so many amazing guests, and really that's the point of the show, is to learn more about the people, because
yes.
There's so many streams, so many YouTube videos of let's look at code and do X, Y, and Z. But we found that there's some really amazing stories behind the tech where we get to know the folks who make those tools that we use every day. And I think most interesting, at least for me, has been learning their story, because we all kind of think of getting into tech. Well, what's that mean? You got to go to college, you got to get a degree, then you got to get a job, and have an internship. And there's like these steps that seem to be prescribed to get into tech. And that's totally not the case. Every guest we've had on has a different background. You and I have different backgrounds. And
exactly.
That's fascinating to me. And I love it. I love it because, spoiler alert, you don't need a degree to get into tech. And you don't have to go to a Ivy League or top tech school to work at a company like Microsoft.
Oh, I hope
didn't.
not. I certainly don't. I'm over here with my theater performance degree. I tweeted something a couple of days ago that actually was inspired by a conversation I was having with one of our previous guests, PJ, two-time guest, PJ Metz. Shout out to PJ. And I think I was texting him and I said, he was having some imposter syndrome, and I said, I'm just 3 children in a trench coat pretending I know how to use a computer. It's okay. And I think it's important to have these conversations, especially as senior engineers, because a lot of the times it used to bother me so much when I was learning to program, and people would be like, oh, that never goes away. And I'm like, it's easy for you to say. You work at Airbnb, and I was going to and now I work at Microsoft. I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of am still.
It never goes away. And
yeah.
And it's easy to forget that because, I'm sure people look at us and they're like, wow, those two people, they've got it all together. We don't. But
no.
Yeah, speaking of PJ, I joined him because PJ's working on a website.
Yeah, you guys were streaming on Sunday. I popped in for a second.
Thanks for joining us.
There was a hamburger. To explain what the hamburger was, because I popped in and you were just finishing up a hamburger segment on this website.
So here, I'll ynfp.net. And let's boop. So if anybody's interested, you can check out PJ's first website. He's just learning to code, and for some reason wanted me to help him make a website. And I'm not a web developer. I'm a mobile developer. I make iOS and Android apps, specifically in C# using Xamarin. But what's been a lot of fun getting back to I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to making Razor pages or ASP.NET Core. And it's fun just to learn and stumble through things together, because like PJ's mentioned that to me before. He's like, oh man, I can't wait to have that much experience and be like that someday. I'm like, dude, it never changes. We all we're just Googling stuff. We don't know what we're doing. We're copy pasting from Stack Overflow. we just know what to Google. I feel like that's the senior is like,
Bing.
you know,
We know what to
that's right. We know exactly what to
We're on
Bing.
the Microsoft development team now, Brandon. Don't mess this up for us.
But yeah, PJ did add in a secret web page to his website. And so I won't spoil it because,
Okay.
well, spoiler alert, all the code for his website is open source. He's got a link to it on that webpage. And so if you want to dig through the source code and find out the URL, because you can't navigate to it, but yeah, I don't know how we got there. We were going to add a new page, and we're like, well, let's just copy paste some old code. And he copy pasted some old code, and you're like, oh, we should just keep that. That's really funny. It's like this burger ordering app that has nothing to do. His website's all about poetry and introducing you to modern day poets that he loves because he's a high school English teacher. And but yeah, if you can find it, let us know.
Yeah. I think that's so cool. I think it's been so fun to see folks. Like, we've had a lot of guests recently, like Lorena, clown turned engineer. We've had bakers turned engineers. We've had, oh my gosh, PJ, who's a high school teacher who's learning how to program right now. And today our guest, you know, it's funny because I don't think about our guest as a non-traditional background person. In my mind, he's just like this super technical dude that's been in my life. But I'll give my little intro of our guest in a second here, so we can, because I'm sure he has a lot to add about copying and pasting things from Stack Overflow. So our special guest today is someone that I met, oh my goodness, 4 years ago maybe, at DevOps Day Boston. And one of my favorite humans, welcome to the show, Cloud Advocate, Jay. Hello, Jay.
Hey.
Hey, dude. Welcome to the show.
Hi. How you both doing?
We're doing good, you know.
Living the dream.
Yeah,
I
feel it.
So we were just talking about, you know, how we have all these people coming from these different backgrounds. And I thought, what better intro than for you, Jay? Because we're going to talk a lot about how you got started with community and everything like that. But tell us a little bit about your imposter syndrome, because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. And do you still have imposter syndrome? What's that like for you?
I'll be real. It was a big problem for me for a while. And the reason why it was is because I had reached a certain point in my career where I compared myself against a lot of my peers. I spent so much time worrying about what other people were doing and trying to do the same thing. And this was when I was a system administrator, and especially when I went into advocacy. But lately, you know, I really came to recognize that my strengths are my strengths. And those are what I focus on now rather than the things I'm not capable of doing. And while I will have moments where I look and I struggle with imposter syndrome, I certainly feel like through a lot of work, I've overcome it a lot. And I am still not the best at what I do. I will never be the best at what I do. But what I do, I appreciate, and I try to do it as best as I can.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, as RuPaul calls it, the inner saboteur. Yes, everyone, I did just take RuPaul's masterclass. Is it showing? But I think that kind of voice in the back of our head, we are kind of our own worst enemy in a lot of ways. But before we get too much deep into imposter syndrome, Jay, give everyone at home here, we know who you are. You're our coworker, of course, on our team. But give the folks at home a little bit of intro on who you are, what you do, what's going on in the world of Jay.
Sure. So right now, I work for the DevOps advocacy team on the Cloud Advocacy Group. We're part of a team called Methods and Practices, and within Methods and Practices, it's all the different ways for you to use the cloud. And so I focus on something I call fundamentals with Azure, and I focus a lot on how DevOps and Azure works together, as well as the fundamentals of how to use it, and especially get your, say, AZ900 or one of those certificates. My career kind of starts in like 1997, when like I have just finished high school and I have absolutely no idea where life is taking me. I don't really want to go to college because I wasn't really good in high school, and some guy had a bunch of dialer racks for dial-up hosting, And he called me one day after I left him a bunch of voicemails saying I wanted to, or answering machine messages saying I wanted to help work for his company. And he said, okay. And he paid me like $3 an hour to help people do like Windows 95 dial-up. And then from there, I tried to go to college, and it really didn't work. Didn't take, I think is the best way to describe it, because I had some things to worry about with my dad. He was not the most well person, and I had to spend time with him and take care of him, and I had to get a full-time job. Ended up dropping out and working as a system administrator for just these different companies. I actually did web design before that, because I have absolutely no design skills, but back in like 2001 or 2002, if you just knew enough HTML, like,
it's
you
so
could pass.
true. We had Anna Medina on the show, a
GeoCities.
friend of yours, Jay, and Anna was
Love
going
Anna.
on with us about Neopets and MySpace. Oh my gosh. I'm wearing my word art shirt today as a tribute.
I love that.
But yeah, I become a system administrator for like one company for like almost 8 years. I ended up spending time at a few places jumping around, and then eventually went to BuzzFeed. That was a really awesome experience because I was there for when that Crazy the Dress thing happened. I was on call that night. I was on call that night. What an absolute nightmare of a situation.
Okay, so for people who were not on the internet that year, real quick, the dress, if people are not familiar, was when it was people on the internet were seeing this dress as blue or gold, I think, depending. It had some sort of like trick of the eye thing, and it blew up on BuzzFeed. And Jay, you used to give a talk about that, right? About like how you dealt with the surge of like the influx on BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I'm going to share something with you really quick. I really love this particular talk that I used to do, and it's about this situation. What it was like to work on the BuzzFeed tech team during record traffic. This was an incredible, incredible night. These were the Nagios alarms that we had when I just found out, and this is the thing that my wife and I, whenever we talk about this story, is how it begins.
Wow.
I didn't know what was going on. I had spent the whole day at a data center because the llamas got loose. Like if llamas got loose.
Okay.
In like
We're
Arizona,
talking about real llamas?
Yes, llamas got loose in the street, and I
Do you
dealt with
cover
a
all of
surge
this in your
in
talk?
one day. And so you can see we ended up having about like 500,000 active users on the site.
Gosh.
Wow.
This was a visualization of all the traffic at once. We took logs and we threw it into this thing that created a GIF.
Whoa.
And then here's Ben Smith, who's now with the New York Times, talking
And this
about
is
how
a BuzzFeed article about. This is so meta.
It's
okay.
incredible.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and just throw this in the private chat, and so if you want to share
Yeah,
with the
this
viewers,
is
go
great.
ahead. But yeah, this was a crazy day, and we all, here are the llamas, and they were the different colors of the dress. But we dealt with just, oh, by the way, she did buy me this drink. Kate Holderness, who actually was like the person that made kind of this viral moment happen after she got the email. And it was about some Tumblr thing. She's now with Tumblr, which is really cool. She was just like the Tumblr like maven of BuzzFeed, and from that became this like insane thing that happened that like I was up until like 4 a.m.
I love that it's just a typical day at BuzzFeed to deal with llama drama and to deal with the dress.
Right? And it's so funny because I wouldn't say I'm very familiar. It's my first time hearing Jay tell the story, but I was familiar with the dress, and I mean, obviously it's gold. I don't know what everybody else is talking about, but it didn't even occur to me that this went viral. And so of course you're going to get tons of traffic, and it might break somebody's website. And it turns out Jay was the one behind all that. What a crazy story.
I love that. It reminds me of a story that's part of the Azure, the Ignite the tour that I gave, that I believe is a story that Christina, who's also on our team, was talking about. The data center went down in New York, and there's so much publication that comes out of the New York area that when big things happen, you need to have a backup.
and guess who was one of those companies that suffered through that?
BuzzFeed.
So that was about 6 months before I worked there. That happened. I started working after, and we had begun this transition from a data center environment mostly to being cloud first. And so that was like my huge introduction into like going cloud as is that
what an intro.
And then
trial by fire.
I spent about a year and a half, at BuzzFeed. And then I went over to DigitalOcean because I wanted to make cloud. It was the best way to kind of describe it. Did that for a little while, then went to MongoDB, and that's when I met Chloe. And then after that, I'm here at Microsoft, and like I said, doing the thing we're doing now. And the big things that I get to do is like my Azure Fun Bite show, and it's really fun. I love doing
previous guest can attest that it's a very fun show.
I volunteer my time for DevOps Days New York City. That's a whole story in itself. We can get to at some point. And
talk about that.
And I am more of a people fan than I am a technology fan. I just happen to work in technology and help people be better at what they do. My technical skills will sometimes not be as great as other people's, but my ability to connect and help some, whether beginners or people making transition to the cloud, I've been able to connect with people and have conversations that make technology more accessible, and I love that, and that's why I do what I do.
I love that you said that. Yeah, it's funny, and we haven't had this conversation. It's not like we cheated before the show and we're talking about exactly what we're talking about. No, we haven't talked about this before, and I literally had that same thought this past week because it kind of hit me. I was connecting a couple folks, like somebody asked for help with something and I wasn't an expert in it, but I knew somebody who knew somebody. Right. And just connecting the pieces together just made me feel so whole. Like it felt better than any code I had written in the last couple weeks. It was such a great accomplishment.
Solving. You know what? I worked when I was a system administrator for a very long time. I worked for a company that had us do phone support and tickets, but the phone support had no triage. You either worked in the Windows department or the Unix department. That was it. Windows or Unix. That's that. And the numbers were and the actual calls were randomly routed. And so it would just go into the ringer and I would pick up a phone. I would have no information about what I was answering. Once in a while we'd get callbacks or customers that would ask for me directly. But the first about 8 years of my big serious tech career was just talking to people about their problems as soon as they picked up the phone with me. I would just hear it and they'd all of a sudden say my website is down, or I can't send email, or our company can't take care of business because our SSL certificate isn't working.
And so the level of empathy that you need, to A, figure out their tech level skills, B, there's so much that goes into those customer support calls.
Yeah. And the question behind the question too, because like you're just saying, Jay, the email server going or not being able to send emails, that doesn't mean the email server's down. It could be a DNS problem. It could be.
It was always that
so
many
different root causes.
It was always that maybe the SMTP server was blocked because of some sort of network restriction at the local place that they were working at. Maybe it was because they were getting mail triggered as spam because there was something about the server that they were sending it from, because they had a little, and if anybody as old as me, had a Cobalt rack machine. If you know what I'm talking about, holler at me in the comments that with SendMail on it or QMail. And we would have to kind of configure those, and that, it was a whole big thing to learn how to do stuff like that.
I think
But
it should be a requirement that everyone who works in tech should have to at least work in customer support for like a brief stint, because I was a customer support representative at a video game company. And I think now as an engineer, I have a lot of empathy for like, when your users are facing an issue, like it is frustrating. And the amount of inbound, like
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between hearing like, hey, we're getting hundreds of emails about this versus seeing each individual email. So I think it should be a requirement.
And I mean, obviously the empathy is crazy important. And I'd say along with that, the other big skill I learned when I was working in support and having to open and close tickets was don't assume anything, because and true story, like I would hear something like my email's down and I would automatically assume that it's the email server, and I would jump in and reboot the email server, and
you
it's
learn
like,
so quick. User error is so much a part of it. So I think I understand what you mean, and empathy has been a big part of what I do. My goal in everything in my career is to have conversations with people that let them know that I'm going to try to understand what their issue is, and if I can't answer it, I'm gonna find an answer. It's gonna happen, and so. I've always felt like it's easier to help people than in the way you can than to always try to solve their problem. And I'll be real, that's a lot of therapy. Oof, that's a lot of therapy. As a person that did, like I said, first run triage work, if you will, for technical support on like Unix servers that were live, that I had no information. I had to kind of learn that the person on the other side of the phone sometimes wasn't there just to make me work. What they were actually there sometimes to do is to make me understand why this is such a problem for them, and for me to respond to that in the coolest way I could, and that it would help them. And if I couldn't give them an answer right this second, hey, I'm gonna get you an answer. It's gonna work out. We're going to work together, and I'm going to make sure that whatever it is the problem, we'll find a way through it. And I think that comes a lot from where I come from. You know what I mean? It's a huge thing of where I come from. And I think we've talked about it.
We're getting awesome comments in. Here's Andrew McCullum, turn a negative to a positive. Yes. And you're right, it is really hard, but it can be done. And it's always rewarding. Very well said.
Yeah.
It's funny, turning a negative into a positive is a big part of like a lot of the music that I grew up listening to that got me to where I am.
And that is a great segue, because your origin story on how...
That's what I do. I'm the segue man.
Let's just zooming by on that segue. So I always knew that Jay was like a fan of music and a fan of Sopranos from his Twitter. But you have your like early beginnings of your community building work based in the music world, Jay. So tell us a little bit about that. That is pretty freaking cool. I heard there's zines involved. So
yeah. So I grew up in New York City, Staten Island specifically, around when I turned about, I guess, 15. I started going to shows around New York City. I had gone to like see my first punk rock show, I think when I was like 13. My stepbrother was a huge like punk rock and hardcore guy. Introduced me to some bands, and our parents split up, was what it was. And I moved to New York. Like I said, I started growing up and living on Staten Island. From there, I went to go see a lot of places like, CBGB's, Coney Island High, the Wetlands, ABC No Rio. And as far as like, we had small little punk clubs where we all had to kind of pool our resources together to make things happen. And it's kind of like derivative of this term called DIY, do it yourself. And those of you who work in something like open source may understand kind of like you're building something for a community, and if you work as a group, as a community together, you can make something really cool happen. And so rather than learn about community going through things like through my school, or by going to college and joining a fraternity. I went to CBGBs every single weekend. I started learning like how to make fanzines, and then at one point in 1997, I made this with a friend of mine. This is
We love a prop. We love a visual.
Cool.
This is a 7-inch vinyl record that my friend and I put out, and it was for a suicide prevention organization that we gave the money to. And one of the coolest parts of it is we put this little mirrored sticker in every single one of the layouts. Every single one. We sat in my friend Chris's house, who did the record with me, and we took these and we folded them, and then we took this mirrored sticker and put one on every single thing individually. I was like 18 years old. I did not know how to make a record. I did not know how to make a band give me music to make a record.
What a learning experience.
I did not know how to take this record and get it into people's hands. I had to learn all that. And it's exactly why I do what it is I do now. Because these are the things that I learned just by doing this. I learned how to take something that had a message. And in this one, we told people we believed that there was an alternative to suicide. And so what we said was, this is something we wanted you to have, and I had to figure out how to get it into everybody's hands. And so now maybe it's not over something quite as serious, but my goal is to always put the things that I think people should see into their hands. And it all kind of starts with like this idea of anybody can do it. All you really need to do is to start with sometimes the docs that are open to you. And with me, making a record, there were books that a fanzine called Maximum Rock and Roll that put out, and Maximum Rock and Roll taught through this like guide of how to book shows, it was called like Book Your Effin' Life, how to book shows to go and get bands to come see you, how to write letters to different people and have them show up. Friends of mine put on like mini hardcore festivals and maybe like 300
That's fascinating because it really does mirror what we do in DevRel specifically now, because I feel like there's so many like articles and talks on how to give talks, and like that's so like one of the big reasons that when people ask for those type of talks that I'm so willing to do them, because I think part of being a good community member is like giving back to the community and giving tools. Like just this morning I was talking to our Microsoft student ambassadors about public speaking and how to present, and how do you do a workshop remotely? Do you do a workshop remotely during these times when we can't be in person, face to face? So I think that's so cool that literally what you did in your community, in this music community, is very open source in the same way that a lot of technology and DevRel is. So many parallels.
Yeah, I think it's important to always kind of do the things that you feel are important to you. You know what I mean? And I've always felt like working to help people has always been my thing. You know, one of the great things about like the shows that we used to put on at this like community center in Staten Island as a kid, if you wanted to get into the show for $1 off, you brought in a can of vegetarian food. And it wasn't to make people want to come. It was to get people to give us the can of food, so then we could go to Samaritan's or I should say a local food bank and give them the cans of food. And so sometimes you can make people do things by telling them there's a carrot, and that carrot might not be something that they realize can be super, super productive for other people. And that's open source. I mean, in general, that's open source.
I love that. I'm writing that down. I'm like, I want to do that when we do in-person meetups again. I'm gonna have people bring stuff. That's a really great idea.
Very well said. We're getting lots of compliments in the comments. I assume Andrew's talking about you, Jay, when he says, "I like this guy."
Hope so.
Nobody's ever said that about me, and we've been doing the show for months. So glad to have you on. This is really
and I
beautiful.
think it's really cool because I think in a lot of ways, people ask me all the time, how do you build community? How do you think about building community? And honestly, I don't also, I have a very different career path from most people. I was in theater and did community theater for a very long time. And I think about a lot of community engagement like I do from my theater past. And I think in the same way that I do that, I encourage a lot of students that I work with and people that I mentor, like, hey, you may not have run a developer community before, but what other communities are you involved with? Do you do lacrosse? Maybe you're involved in some sort of podcast that you run, and like that's a community in itself, all of your fans of the podcast. There's so many kind of translatable communities, and I actually think the superpower is using non-traditional ways to get communities involved. So this way that Jay was explaining is such a great example. When we did Century Scouts, we made it camp themed. Like that was just an idea of like, I really like parties that are themed. Like, let's make a meetup that's themed. There's so many things that you can take from your experience in other communities into tech. And I think it's so exciting when we see those worlds collide, because creative examples are great.
When we did JewelBots together, you really found a way to kind of bring that thing of making people feel like there's more going on than what you're actually providing them. And in that case, by using community to hide what your real motive is. And
sure.
So Chloe and I did this event with a whole bunch of little girls where we taught them how to use these JewelBot IoT devices. And so we kind of built the thing as an event, almost
and for people not familiar with JewelBots, they're these really cute, they're aimed at girls kind of elementary school, middle school age to learn how to program. Our good friend Sarah Chips founded the company, and it teaches you how to program, and you can like send little buzzes or light up when you're near your friends. Really, really cool product. And yeah, so we wanted to just host a workshop to encourage little girls how to code.
And that was the funny thing, is that we did something that I know, Chloe was more capable of than me, which was we tried to present it in a way that a bunch of little girls at a birthday party would kind of feel, and it was kind of the way we put it together.
Yeah, we had like colored hairspray, we had a nail station, we had Shrek the Musical playing in another room for people who decided maybe coding's not for them. So I think like and I'm sure y'all feel the same way as cloud advocates, my strategy with teaching people to learn is the Mary Poppins spoonful of sugar technique, because I think when you're having fun, it's harder to realize that you're learning.
Absolutely true. So true. It's incredible how like if you make something, and like I said, if you make something seem like it's not really work or you're not really learning, and that's why we like with like Microsoft Learn. Like we gamify so many things part of it, because it makes it that you're not necessarily feel like you're working or you're learning. You're kind of going through this thing, you're getting points, and along the way you're kind of figuring things out. And I always love that.
And that was part of our gamification for the meetup that I used to host. Was I thought, okay, I don't want to go to a meetup every month, but what would get me to go to a meetup every month? And I was like, swag. This was back in the olden times when we could meet in person. So we ended up, because it was a camp themed meetup, we had these patches and stickers that were themed for each event. So it'd be like the DevOps patch, the like open source patch. And so once you kind of add these gamified elements to things, like think about what gets you to go to, I was going to Alamo Drafthouse all the time because I wanted to get the points. So I was like, how can I simulate points in a community environment and get my community excited about it? And the best part was, we had a woman who had all 12 of the patches at the end of a whole year set. I didn't even have all the 12, and I hosted the event. So I think it's cool when you find creative ways to get the community involved, like zines. Like I love this idea of a zine, Jay, because I know Sailor HG has been doing some really cool zines with like how a calculator works, how computers work, and there's so many like creative ways that I've seen people involve technology and community.
I started making like my own zines when I was like 15, and they were pretty vulgar about like things I didn't like, because I was an angry 15-year-old kid.
As a 15-year-old does.
Yeah. We want a live journal.
And then there was another thing about like, just like my friends' bands and stuff like that, an interview with another friend's band. It was just a way to get people to like talk about things that were going on. And so they were cheap to make. And back in the 90s, there was a thing kind of known as Kinko's cards. And Kinko's cards were these cards that you could pre-purchase to make photocopies at your local Kinko's, when Kinko's eventually became like, I don't know, UPS stores or something like that. And then we had friends who knew people who worked at Kinko's, and people would somehow or another share cards. We don't know where they came from, but then we would use those to like make our fanzines. Or say I would go to the school that I went to, I would use the photocopier like in the library and not say why. I would just make a whole bunch of copies. And then when I was a teenager, I didn't really like high school that much. I went into a program that let me go to work 1 week at a major bank in Manhattan, and then school the next week. And so the weeks I would be at work, I would use the photocopier and I would make fanzines.
Oh my goodness.
And
yeah.
And it's such an important takeaway too, to make things for people, help people, because we've been talking a lot about like building communities, and if your intent is to get famous, like people will ask me like, how do you get more Twitter followers, and how do you get more subscribers, and that's the wrong question to be asking yourself. The question you should be asking yourself is, how can I help people? How can I create content? How can I write a blog post, make a video, something that will help others? Then the community builds around that, and that's when you'll get the subscribers and the followers, because people want to see what you make next, because the last blog post or the last video is so helpful. And
sure, it's the same thing with say the last fanzine that you made, or the last time you if you're a band, you wrote a record that a whole bunch of people really appreciated, and the next time you had something to say, the next record they bought because the message you had somehow or another. And we were talking about this before the show, and if anybody knows who the band Minor Threat is, one of the things that was great about the band Minor Threat, they wrote songs that were maybe about a minute long, and in that 1 minute, you got to learn everything you needed to know about that song and everything that the singer Ian MacKay wanted you to learn about. And I feel like nowadays my goal is in a minute to give you everything, or maybe in a 5-minute presentation, a 20-minute talk, a 30-minute presentation. I don't care. I want you to feel like when I've done something, that the thing that I wanted to communicate to you, you understood. And so if you look at something like a Minor Threat song, they trim the fat. There's no solo. There's no big lead. There's no huge like fills. It's a fast song with a message, and you understand it by the end. And that's the way I look at technology and sharing education around it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love it. I'm going to put that quote like on this episode. I couldn't agree more.
And it's hard to do. I think it's a Mark Twain quote, and I'm going to paraphrase, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something like, I decided to write you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. And like condense words down is a lot harder than just to kind of let it all out and hope everybody can kind of connect the dots. But yeah, if you can condense something down from an hour to 45 minutes, from 45 minutes to 30 minutes, it's going to be that much more valuable. And like you're saying, Jay, it also shows you value other people's time. Like, I don't need to waste 60 minutes of your life. I can do this for you in 30 minutes.
Yeah, I love it. And Jay, I know there's like kind of, we're all on Twitter, obviously. We're tweeting all the time. And I definitely personally have felt that anytime that I'm posting, especially community related things, or even sometimes some technical things that I make, like the fake boyfriend app, the more authentic I am, like whenever I share something that's like, it's one thing to share a project that's like, look at this thing that I built with Azure, sure. But when we're doing this work in the community, like the Jewelbox one is a great example, or even just like building products that are helpful for people. And I know, Jay, you recently hosted a DevOps days that you just had to really be the one of the superheroes of it. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to put on a community event like that in the midst of a scary pandemic on the way, and how do you bring together community in a situation like that?
Sure. So on February 29th of this year, I got back from Copenhagen, Denmark. I had been in Denmark, and then before that, Geneva. And through those trips, they were for DevOps days in Geneva, and then Microsoft Ignite, the tour in Copenhagen. I had gone through all these like big talks and had spent almost 7 months planning DevOps days in New York City. And my plan was to come home from Europe, MC this conference, and then get ready for what was next. And I think it was go to Amsterdam for like the next Microsoft Ignite the tour. And so the last thing I remember is March 3rd and 4th is when, or I shouldn't say that. The big thing I remember is March 3rd and 4th is when DevOps Days New York City was. And all of a sudden, people stopped wanting to come. Speakers were concerned. I was concerned, and so I don't want to speak for anyone else that was part of this, but as a person that organized myself, I can tell you that it was a difficult decision to want to do a conference because nobody knew what was going on at the time in the world. And so we get through March 3rd and 4th. You know, we do have maybe 150, 200 people that show up. You know, we originally had planned somewhere in the number of 500 to 600. But the thing that we really learned is that we didn't know what was going on, and that's the best way to put it. Nobody told us anything in the world, and because of that, we still put on our conference. And, you know, I left that conference, you know, hoping things were going to work out well. And there were, because a lot of people came that did come and enjoyed themselves. There was great food. There was a lot of really amazing talks. But I don't think anybody kind of knew what was coming. And, you know, March 15 is when New York City, where we hosted this, shut down. And so I think about those, you know, that from March 4th to March 15th, that time really sat with me. Because how I had to negotiate the idea that I did a big, you know, public event was really difficult. But, you know, it remains probably the last big tech event that's happened in North America. It's probably one of the last, if you think about it in the context of the nationwide quarantine. It was probably one of the last tech conferences in North America. And it was a lot to negotiate mentally to get it done, and a lot to navigate logistically. But we did it. I wish it happened in a different type of, you know, situation. But we got it done. Community is just so important. But the safety of community is paramount. And I think that's why, not just in this situation, but codes of conduct and community are so important. And I think that's why we talk about that constantly, because community safety, even in open source projects, if someone's going to make a comment on something, you want to make sure that comment isn't something that's offensive or horrible, or it's going to make everyone feel bad. You want people to work on things collaboratively so you feel good about it, because there's a safety that comes from that, and safety of communities, whether it's health or whether it's, you know, shielding people from abusive, you know, contributors. It's all relative. And so I always believe that, you know, that kind of thing that they say, the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm. You know, I think that should come along with how we do community.
Yeah. And I think I know the three of us, we're traveling quite a bit and doing a lot of in-person office hours and meetups and events. How has that been for you, Jay, to kind of, I know you're doing a lot of stuff with your Azure Fun Bites and hosting a lot of live events, but how's that transition been for you? I know off camera earlier, we had a conversation that sometimes we can, much in the same way that, you know, we commit to an event in the evening or speaking at something, sometimes we forget that presenting is work. and it can take
Yeah.
a lot out of you. And being a community member is an active process. So how do you balance, like, when do you turn on your community brain at night and morning, and what has your life been now as a dev advocate?
I think I mentioned it, that the one thing that I had to do was to reorganize how my brain works when it comes to advocacy. And that started by not asking anyone for advice. That was the best thing I started doing. And I said, as an advocate, what do I need to do right now to make a message be heard? And so I said, well, I need to come up with a format that works. I need to come up with a focus that people need, and that was fundamentals, and that's what Azure Fun Bites is. And so I asked myself, how do I present these things in the best possible way? And I said, well, live streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and like we're doing right now, is one of the most effective ways to have conversations. And so I started learning how to do this more and more. I've learned the technologies that I needed to get it done. And then I started learning how to make prepackaged, like, short form videos. And that meant learning how to be a video like editor and producer or whatever. These are things that I've never done. Before March, I had never done any of this kind of work before. And all of a sudden it became my job. And so what I decided to do was just throw my entire life into this whole change of mindset of how advocacy should be done. And our leaders at Microsoft said, we need to be focused on reaching everyone everywhere. And if we're online and we create content that is easily ingested anywhere at any time by anyone, then we're really accomplishing what we're supposed to be doing. And so that's my hyper laser focused path right now, is to make people understand technology in the easiest way possible anywhere in the world through basic conversations.
I've loved all of the new interesting ways people are connecting as developers. My manager, shout out to Jen Looper, JavaScript auntie on TikTok, giving out VS Code tips on TikTok. I just think it's really cool. It's been such a fun kind of time of exploration and connecting with people on different channels and platforms. I did DevOps party games a couple weeks ago, which is really fun. Got to do a live game show with a bunch of tech people like Ian Coldwater and a bunch of other folks. Yeah. What about you, Brandon? Are you we're doing this show, obviously. We were not doing this show before.
That's right.
There's so many, because you used to do a lot of workshops.
Oh, yeah. That was kind of my bread and butter. I take a lot of pride in workshops where anybody can attend them no matter what your skill level is. So if you are brand new to programming, you'll be able to successfully complete this workshop. If you've been programming for 10 years and just want to learn something new, and it's probably in Azure or Xamarin, which is where my expertise is, then you can come learn something new. And yeah, I was pretty terrified when the pandemic hit, because that meant I can't travel. I can't host workshops in person anymore. I can't speak at conferences anymore. And that was pretty much what I've been doing for the last 2 to 3 years. And I knew this world existed of streaming content, being on Twitch and streaming code, hosting interviews and speaking at conferences remotely. It was not really a thing, but some conferences did it. And it's been really cool to jump into this world and learn it, because I was terrified. I didn't have a microphone or a camera. I didn't know how to edit videos, like Jay was saying. You have to kind of become this almost one person
multimedia producer.
Yeah.
This is finally the tables have turned, because I've been learning all these tech things with all this media producer experience from my theater degree, and now it's funny how this all works.
Now you're just an expert.
I think it's such a great example, though, of this growth mindset of, I don't know how to do that thing, but I'm going to go figure it out. That, in the same way that if I started learning VR and AR today, I would know nothing. So many people at home are having to adapt with their community building and their streaming, techniques. And it's just so cool to see how everybody's connecting differently.
Yeah. And to be honest, I love this now. I was actually speaking with my manager earlier this week, because I guess I spoke at a conference this morning. Shout out to Telleric for hosting the DevReach conference. It's still going, so highly recommend it. But yeah, I told him, I was like, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I miss traveling. I don't miss traveling as much as I used to travel, but yeah, I would love to keep this up, doing these weekly shows, doing conference live streams, being able to do so much virtually, where before it required you to essentially devote a week to it. You had to get on a plane, you had to fly somewhere, you had to book a hotel, all that stress involved. And now we can all just connect.
Have you guys found that you think about community differently? Because I used to think of community on a local level. Like, oh, we have the Microsoft Reactor in San Francisco, or we have, I spoke at this wonderful event in Prague called Chiquitas, a female meetup of all female developers. Best name ever, Chiquitas. Shout out to Chiquitas. But I think previously I've always kind of thought of giving talks as, much in the same way that theater, you do a show in a very small black box or on Broadway. Only those 200 people in that theater get to see that show on that night. And what's really, really cool, because when you're giving a talk, you're not giving it every night. You're giving it once and you're done. Like, you fly out to wherever you give it and you give it. So I found this time to be really interesting, because I consider community as far as India now. Like, I have people who tune into streams from all over the world. I've talked at events of places that I haven't visited yet even. So it feels almost like we can reach more people, which has been just really, really cool for me.
Yeah, and even things like we were talking about, I'm working on a website for the first time in my career. Nobody would have ever invited me to speak at a conference about how to build a website.
Right.
Mostly because I have no idea what I'm doing. But here we are, I can spend a Sunday morning on Twitch and we can figure it all out together. And that's so much better. Like, as silly as it seems to, for me just to be Googling stuff and copying and pasting from Stack Overflow live, it really shows a sneak peek into what being a developer is really like. That's it. I mean, there's more to it, obviously, but yeah, none of us have this stuff memorized. We don't know what we're doing.
I'll watch any other people's streams, because I have been a huge fan. Well, I've been watching PJ's stream on the weekend, so I've been watching you, Brandon, code a bunch. But a still tech-related, in my opinion, stream that I've been enjoying is Sailor HG's Animal Crossing stream. I have learned a lot about Animal Crossing from this stream, and what I think is really wonderful is I think I get to watch people stream who wouldn't otherwise be streaming if we weren't staying at home.
Yeah, what's really awesome? My homie Austin, who I do a podcast with called Fisked Pod, and anybody who's ever used Fisk on a hard drive knows what it is. But my homie Austin, he actually did an entire DevOps conference in Animal Crossing.
And I believe right.
Ian was one of the speakers, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Ian Coldwater and I think Heidi Waterhouse and a whole
And that
bunch
probably
of
would
other
have
people.
never happened if we were all doing our things all around the world, living our normal lives.
Matt
what, are you crazy?
Matt Stratton, a whole bunch of other people are part of this, and it's because they love this video game. I personally, I didn't really know much about it. I just know that Tom Nook sounds like a guy I don't want to deal with. He makes you take mortgages.
I owe him some money. Yeah.
No bosses, no masters. Sorry, Tom Nook. I'm not interested. But
it's when you think about it, think about how many people attended that conference, and in any other scenario, there's no way you could have gotten a couple hundred adults to sit down for an hour during the day. It's crazy. I love it. It's so creative.
I think that's one of the things you have to be able to do right now. That's what I'm trying to do. Is if you're creative and you do things that people are both entertained by and they're also educated by, that they'll want to keep coming back. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Like I said, Azure Fun Bites, please come on the week every Thursday on 2 p.m. Twitch.tv/Azure Fun Bites. I try to make things fun and conversational. I do demos, but during the demos, I normally have a guest. That guest will help me learn about what we're going through, and maybe I teach them. So Chloe, we've done that before. Hey Brandon, maybe you can give me a little Xamarin one of these days, because I'm not much of a Xamarin person, but I definitely could learn a few things, and I know that the audience that I have would love to hear about what you can teach us. So it's really awesome to be able to work with also people across our advocacy team, and to say, hey, here's an idea, you want to give this a shot, and seeing if it works. Like, hey, what are we doing right now? And that's the awesome thing, is you try what works.
And I will also plug, if you are watching this from my YouTube channel right now, Jay and I have a show and tell episode where we walk through Power Apps. That's really, really fun. Logic apps. We walked through Logic apps. I'm confusing my other Power App that I'm building right now with Shania, which I think I accidentally dropped a link to in the chat right as we started. But yeah, it's so fun because I knew nothing about Logic apps before Jay taught it to me. Now I'm using them all the time to automate a bunch of processes for me. So I think there's just so many cool people to learn from. Too many things to learn, really, y'all. There's too many cool things to learn.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Well, we are at the end of our show here. We've got a couple more minutes. Jay, we have your Azure Fun Bites, your Twitch channel here. You're on Twitter. We've got your Twitter handle listed right here. Any other fun events or things we should be taking a look out for that are coming up for you?
Just really looking forward to the new Borat movie. That's really about it.
Oh my gosh, what's the date? 2 days.
Chloe, I'm going to send you something very, very important that you can enjoy this evening. We'll talk about it after. But let's put it this way: you'll be able to see it sooner than later.
Great. All right. I'm very excited
I'll share
for that as well.
There's a watch party this evening. And so I'm very much looking forward to it. But other than that, I do Azure Fun Bites every week. It's really fun. I really enjoyed doing Ignite this year. If you want to check out, you can look up aka.msj at Ignite. You can watch my Ignite tour talk, my Ignite 2020 talk. And other than that, it's just, another day for Jay doing something.
Great. Well, Brandon, you got any plugs before we go? Anything exciting? You just spoke at a conference, correct?
I did. I woke up early and flew all the way to Bulgaria to speak at DevReach.
You came back just
power of the internet.
Yeah, I somehow or another talked at Buffalo recently.
Oh.
Hey, all right. As a upstate New Yorker, cheers to that.
Are you streaming with PJ this weekend?
I believe so. We're trying to stream every Sunday morning on Twitch on Metzing Around is PJ's handle. And yeah, so if you've never built a website and you want to join the struggle, come join us. Yeah. Or if you have built websites with Razor Pages and ASP.NET Core and want to help out some struggling developers, also come join us.
Yes.
That'll be it's noon Eastern every Sunday. Metzing Around on Twitch.
Amazing. And not to plug all PJ things, but Shania Bot, if you're not following Shania Bot, bot_Shania on Twitter. We've created a very fun bot with Logic apps, actually, Jay. You are a big inspiration for us building this, where if you need the motivation every morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to tell you, let's go, girls, boy, do we have a Twitter bot for you. New features coming very soon, which include if you tag our Shania bot and tell her that you are not impressed or ask if she should be impressed with something, she will respond. So keep an eye out for that. Updates coming soon. There's a link on the Twitter to build your own one. So check that out. But that has been the show today, y'all. Thanks for joining us, Jay. And we'll see y'all on our next episode. Bye.
Later, yo.